Pasha Paroh, Y97. Got my man Cam with me at the moment. Hopefully, maybe we'll be joined by Margaret, who is having some technical difficulties. Please excuse the delay. Cam, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me back on here.
Man, always a perfect day. Got a great flow for the people today. I appreciate you joining. So we had a conversation came up about decluttering, which is something you're naturally centered around. We had Margaret included because she does aging in place from a realtor standpoint, and we have a great conversation that we're going to go ahead and get started with, and if she can join, then that'll be great. So, Nature's Guide to Decluttering, the forest cycle approach. Okay, so historically, consumption in the United States was primarily necessity based. Before the 20th century, the economic motive for increased consumption among the masses was minimal, and with frugality and thrift being more appropriate due to the uncertainty of survival, right, at the time, which we're at times we feel like we might be going full circle sometimes. But people focused on acquiring essential goods such as food, shelter, and clothing, and they had little room for luxury or excess. Kind of speak on that from your vantage point.
Yeah, I think things are a little bit different now. It's not to say that people have more in terms of disposable income or anything else, although that may be true. But I think the way we consume is very different now. I saw somebody explain once that 30 years ago, luxury items like TVs, cars, high-end furniture, china, those things were very expensive relative to your cost of living. So if you went and spent $1,500 on a TV, that was like twice your rent at that point in time. So that was truly a luxury item, and you had a hard time justifying it. We live in a world now where your rent is $3,000 and a TV costs $300, and so it's no longer a luxury item. And right. So you're more justified in buying, I shouldn't say you're more justified, but you think you're more justified in being able to buy those things. Plus, those things are designed to be functionally obsolete in a very short period of time. So even though you're only spending $300 on a TV, that TV may only last you 3 years, whereas that $1,500 TV in 1989 lasted you 10 years. And so the cost may actually be the same, but you're falling into a replacement cycle. And that's true with everything we consume. So whether that's clothing, electronics, appliances, furniture, household goods, we're in a place where, we feel like we're able to buy more. We're marketed in very aggressive ways. And so we're a different consumer than we were before. And as a result, our houses get filled with stuff that we needed for a short period of time or no longer need. So yeah, I think that's well said to say we now live in a place where we just put a lot more into our space than we used to. Plus, we have bigger spaces sometimes.
Yeah. So speaking on that, right? During the pre-20th century period, there was much longer working hours, often exceeding 60 to 80 hours per week as the norm, right? Across most sectors, whether it was agriculture, industry, or even domestic work. So this reflects the necessity-based lifestyle of the time, where survival depended on sheer effort and productivity. So the lack of luxury and excess consumption meant people worked primarily to meet immediate needs, leaving little time for leisure or even rest, which, like you said, $3,000 a month rents, we might be encroaching back towards that direction. So this historical context provides a stark contrast with the modern conditions as you were describing, that highlights, you could say labor reform, economic growth, stuff like that, and have transformed the relationship between work and consumption over time. So yeah, $300 TVs, now they're piling up. So what that did at the time was give us that empty house, like that empty land before the forest grows, before the crops are planted. The empty home was empty because they couldn't afford to put nothing in it, and we were rarely there because we were working 80 hours a week to begin with. So that's the spring, the fresh start, the empty home in this forest cycle, right? In the spring, where the forest begins anew, much like an empty home. How does take that vision and just speak on that for a moment? How we went from we couldn't afford anything, and that creates the the empty forest for the new growth before it happens from your vantage point, and we're going to work our way towards where your services are highly valued.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of filling a house and the stuff that we fill it with has a lot of there's a lot of emotion to it. We buy things because of the way it makes us feel. It's a quick fix. There's a dopamine hit there. There's social credit that you're trying to earn with those things, and so I think we have sort of devalued this idea of space. I had a customer tell me once, I just need you guys to come because messy bed, messy head. And she was sort of identifying that the noise by way of stuff that was filling up her space was creating, anxiety, weight, mental confusion, like just sort of a difficulty prioritizing the things in her life. And so I think that's true. You talk about being busy or not being in a certain space, and therefore you don't have that desire to fill it up. Like in my own master bedroom, I'm pretty much in there to sleep. That's my wife goes to bed before me. Usually the lights are out by the time I walk in. I don't really care what her furniture is in there. I don't it's the room that I probably stress over the least, and it's because it's a functional space that I don't busy myself with the other things. It's also a private space, I guess, so maybe people don't see it, and I don't feel any sort of pressure to load it up. But I think there's a lot to that idea that the fresh start and maintaining and managing that clarity of space, to maintain clarity of thought, to maintain clarity of life is a good place to begin.
Yeah, and when you say a great place to begin, I really we have to take for a moment and pause and be like, yeah, to us in our mindsets, it was that new beginning. Like, we think about the TPs, or they taught us about TPs. We think about the little wooden houses and stuff on the prairie, little house on the prairie type stuff. You know what I mean? But we got to remember there was whole civilizations made of stone and great architecture and grandeur before this. So there's these big cycles, right? And inside this cycle, so that was like there was this civilization that something happened to, and then there was a need. It was buried, it was hidden, it was decluttered. The world was decluttered, right? And then we got to start anew. So here's the new growth. Here's how we got here on that level. And we're going to show the macro and micro as to how it applies to the cycle of a home and aging through senior citizens and stuff too as well. So the new growth, the trees sprout, the leaves, symbolizing the excitement and optimism for a new living space. It's a clean slate. The forest floor is relatively clear. It's mirroring the sense of control in an uncluttered home. And like you said, your client, that's vibrant energy, the burst of life and color, and the spring parallels the reduced stress and mental clarity of organized space. So when individuals, and particularly seniors, first moved into a home, it represents a blank canvas full of possibilities. What vibes have you gotten from your clients by the time you get to them, from when they first started in that empty canvas, and you bring them back and renew that for them and renew that ability to paint again in life?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the idea of intention. And so I read a stat that says Americans put a new item into their house once every 3 days. We're not removing things once every 3 days. So even if you're starting with that blank canvas, so again, using myself as an example, I moved here from California. The house that we moved into was twice the size of the house we had in San Diego. And so when we got here, it was like, oh my gosh, this house is, there's so much space. How are we ever going to fill it? Like, and we didn't really feel any pressure to fill it, but it was just like, my gosh, we can breathe. The sparseness of space was refreshing. It felt good actually to have the open space. And now 6 years later, I don't feel that our stuff our stuff is full, and I own a junk removal business, so I have the ability to back a trailer into my driveway and do this stuff. But even still, you just accumulate through living, and it's those things that you're like, I'm not using it now, but I probably will need it at some point, so I'll put it in the junk drawer. Or I got a shelf in the garage, and so the space is there, I might as well fill it. And you multiply that behavior times 30 years when we're working with some of these seniors who've been through seasons of life where they've had the young kids with all the things that go along with young kids, who've moved in teenage years and ultimately left the house, and you're left with those remnants. And those remnants have a lot of emotion tied to them. They're, reminders of the life you've built in that place. And so getting rid of it is sometimes associated with guilt. Sometimes it's associated with sadness, for the seasonal changes that happen in life. And so that's a lot of our experiences, helping people. I didn't expect it to be part of our job, but helping people go through that emotional response to the stuff. And eventually, they go through, I think there's probably some truth in going through the stages of grief where you get to the point where you're like, it's time to let this stuff go. And then you do start to feel that sense of renewal, or being refreshed, and then people start to embrace it. And it's like, well, now that we're going, once you get that inertia going and you start the decluttering process, it starts to feel pretty good, especially when you have a plan. And that's what Margaret would have really talked about, is that plan to make sure you're going through that. So it's not just a willy-nilly kind of, this goes here, that goes there, I'm overwhelmed, and so everything goes away. And then you get into your new space and you realize you did get rid of something that was important to you, or you didn't have a strategy for sort of collecting the sentiment or the feeling behind the object that doesn't necessarily have to be represented by the object itself. But when you have that plan and then you go through the process, it is a brand new feeling, which is pretty powerful, and one of the favorite parts of my job, actually.
Yeah, the idea was to have these intervals bounced off of you and Margaret from the two different perspectives. Technology on her side has caused us to be here right now, a little delay, but it's always the perfect day. So to recap, the excitement and the optimism of the empty space symbolizes new beginnings and potential. It gives you a sense of control back that the clutter took away from you. With minimum possessions, there's a feeling of order and manageability, and it has a reduced stress effect. The uncluttered environment promotes mental clarity and relaxation, right? So that's kind of like how we got to this, from the little house on the prairie, where back in the day when nobody could really afford anything, they were working 80 hours a week. They didn't have any luxury items. They were never home because they were working, and they couldn't afford to buy anything anyway. So the home was empty, just like the field is empty before it was planted, just like, before the forest there wasn't trees. All right. So now we get into this cycle, right? The forest, and I know you're on your phone, so you probably can't see the screen.
I sure can.
Oh, awesome. So great. So the forest as a market economy, right? Taken together, these parallels illustrate how a forest functions as a self-sustaining market economy, where interconnected systems ensure the efficient flow of resources, energy, and information, as I have here. So just as the human economy evolved through technological and industrial advancements, forests have developed intricate systems over the millennia to operate for survival and growth as well. And what that did for humanity is it actually created the shift towards a consumer culture, and began to take shape in the early 20th century, particularly in the 1920s. So this period marked a significant transformation as the notion of individuals as consumers became more prevalent. The economic growth in what they call the United States during this time provided basic security and a large portion of the population, for a large portion of the population, allowing them to shift and focus from mere survival to acquisition of goods. Right? So like a seed, right? Once it gets access to the nutrients, it grows. So if the forest represents the clutter, right, cycle, well, there's your beginning. Speak about that for us.
Yeah, I mean, I started this business, one of the thoughts being that I was going to rally against this idea of mass consumerism. I saw my kids growing up in this world where, we've got super intrusive marketing. Even those of us who think we're resilient to marketing, we're not, because the machine knows what we're going to think before we think it and puts it in front of us and makes us feel certain ways. And so I was like, man, this is my little act of rebellion, that we can fight against this consumer driven machine. We can help people find that clarity and that peace in their life by handling the stuff that's physically obstructing them, keeping them from getting there. That's a hard habit to break for all of us. And so, it requires maintenance. It requires diligence. The word again of the day for me is always intentionality. It requires active thoughts in that. And so, yeah, I mean, this forest of stuff, filling our life is growing fast. It's like a bamboo forest, like it's growing fast. And so it's the way we're bred, and being a B Corp, we spend time in circles that have a different look at the world. And so one of the ideas is buy local, buy quality products that are intended to last, so you're not constantly having to replace them. This fast fashion sort of buy it for a season, throw it away mentality is something, spend a little bit more, buy the thing that's going to last you a lot longer. I just had this conversation with my kids. Half my wardrobe is older. My oldest is going on 16. I think half my clothes are older than he is. And not that I'm a beacon of style, but I don't think I look old fashioned, whereas if it were 1992 and I were wearing things from 1978, it might look a little dated. And so we live in a time where maybe things are a little more homogenized, so things you can invest in things because quality stuff will last a little bit longer. But I am constantly, the two things that surprise me about our job with regard to consumerism is, one, the amount of jobs we get that we're just throwing away Amazon boxes. And some people will roll up a garage and it's just a mountain of boxes, and they're really just paying us to get rid of the boxes themselves. None of the items that, those items they purchased are replacing. It's really just getting rid of boxes. And then when we do some of these clean outs, especially, eviction clean outs, the amount of clothing we find hanging in closets that still have tags on it is pretty shocking. So there's stuff hanging there that has never been worn. Clothes stores like Ross, Burlington, Home Goods. I mean, we find garages full of home good products with tags and wrappers still on them. So it's like you bought the thing, you had this, this good intention, and it didn't. The follow-up action to actually put it up or put it to use or whatever didn't get put into play. And so it's just you bought it for the sake of buying it, not for the sake of it existing in your life.
That's actually, you bring up a lot of great points there. A lot of people can relate to it, and women and men, right? So we know the stereotypes of the multiple shoes and the women having stuff in there with the tags on it, but men do it too. And actually, you bring up a great point by it being a hard habit to break, because it was actually programmed into us. if you're not aware. The 1920s saw the emergence of what was termed the new economic gospel of consumption. And that's not me making up the words, that's literally what they called it. So, where the idea was to educate workers in the skills of consumption and encourage them to value goods over free time. So, this era was characterized by the development of a national market facilitated by the expansion of the telegraph and the railroad systems back in the day, the rise of big business and industrial advancements, enabling mass production, which you kind of hinted on, and the proliferation of advertising and the indoctrination or the induction of credit purchasing, right? So we really haven't shifted too far away from that. If you think about it, the core elements of the consumer culture, acquisition, desire, advertising, and the pursuit of happiness through materialism still persist today. But they've been amplified and transformed by technology. Like you said, Amazon boxes, the internet, social media, and data analytics have made consumption more personalized, globalized, and instantaneous, while services like BNPL, which is buy now, pay later, and the fast fashion ensure that participation in the consumer culture is accessible to all, regardless of income. And I think that causes the problem. But I'm going to break there and let you speak on what I just covered, because it's a programming, and then we can go into how that creates the problem.
I don't know if I have a lot to add. I think what you said was really well said. The idea that it is right there, it's frictionless, it's easy to buy, it's immediate. You can buy it on your phone, have it by this afternoon. There's things that sort of correspond with that. So like the example that comes to mind, we just bought a car for my son. We were looking for, trying to find a private seller, and you can't even find a private seller because, it's just easier to sell it through an app, through a tool. And so, yeah, it's just the both the disposal and the acquisition of it is much more difficult.
Okay, great. So now that's the summer. So we had the.
Okay. Want to go dump and then come back?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you good. Running the team. So we had the winter, and now we just described how we got the summer, which was the accumulation phase. The summer is akin to the gradual accumulation of possessions. The lush growth, trees develop full canopies. That's the accumulation. You get the biodiversity, the teeming of life. All these different products come available. You can access, get to abundance of resources, stored energy. It's just like how people accumulate things, items for security, right? So that's the accumulation phase. There's emotional attachments, which is the problem. Items become links to memories and experiences, making them difficult to part with. There's the... Did I lose you? Are you still with me? Okay, still with me. All right, cool. So, yeah. Sound check. Okay, cool. So identity formation, right? Possessions often serve as extensions of one's identity now. Security and comfort. So accumulating the items can provide a sense of security, particularly for seniors who may have experienced scarcity in the past because they've grown up in some of these time periods. And then there's the basic consumer culture that we was talking about. So the ease of acquiring new items in modern society. Now, what this does, though, here's what I thought was a fascinating thing, right? Because here's the senior that with a bunch of stuff they gotta get rid of. But when you're wealthy, right, do you think that they have more or less stuff, wealthy people, compared to us?
Maybe it's relative, but I don't know if that's true. I mean, even in the experience, we've been in people's homes on all phases of the economic spectrum, and I don't know if I could say with confidence that one socioeconomic group has more than another.
Okay, because what I was thinking was, the issue isn't, remember earlier we talked about there's a wealth discrepancy, right? Because we've got access to buy all this stuff now, like you said, the cheap stuff that don't last, is going to break in 2 years, we're gonna have to buy a new one. So we got access to all this stuff now, but the wealth factor didn't change. So what's important is the majority of people don't have the space, they can't afford the space to actually put all the great stuff that they trying to hang on to in life. So it's not necessarily how much stuff they have, it's how little space they have to put it in. So I think that creates the demographic, because the wealthy people, they'll have a space for their little, this is my katana sword that I purchased in 1940 from when I was overseas, and they'll have a whole little like museum type exhibit for it, right? Because they have the space and the funds to invest in the proper display, right? So the past, the wealth remains concentrated in the hands of the few, and the democratization of desire continues to outpace that of wealth and power. So at the same time, we're growing awareness of sustainability, and the rise of digital economies hint at the potential shift in the way we consume, though it remains to be seen whether these changes will actually alter the trajectory, because again, what's happening is we just don't have nowhere to put the stuff, right? And then that's where you guys come in as therapists. So the average consumer can buy all this stuff, but they can't display it properly. So speak on that for a moment, and pros and cons of that from your vantage point, please.
Yeah, I think you brought up an interesting point. There's two ends of the spectrum there. So I think there's clutter that's created by consumption, and so people buying what they need. And so like when you were talking earlier about women filling up their closets and it also affecting men, one of the places we see it affect men in particular, and not to play stereotypes, but is in the garage, and with tools. And so like if you have a need, if you're working on a home improvement project, you go out and you buy a tool. So I always joke, like every garage we clean out has a fence post digger, because at some point somebody's had to dig one fence post or put a mailbox in or something, and they've used that tool once and now it's sat in their garage for 30 years, for the next time they're going to have to use it, which is they never do, because we come and we get rid of it. Mm-hmm. And so there's probably a socioeconomic class that will go and buy the tool they need for the one-time use. On the other end of the spectrum, I think thrift also drives clutter. And so there are people who acquire things or buy things, maybe for a one-time use with the idea that they'll use it again, failing to recognize that storing it, moving it, putting it in a storage unit, all comes with a cost that's probably higher than the replacement cost. And so when we do go to some of these, customers that are that don't have as much space or don't come from a place with as much wealth, the clutter issues are maybe driven more by thrift and accumulation. And so it's two different spectrums, or two ends of the spectrum, I should say, that lead to the same problem, which is too much stuff. And so it's interesting to think about the motivations and where it comes from and the root causes of it. But I think it does come from a couple different places like that.
Yeah. And just something that we take for granted, like having family photos, as you can see on the screen here, the wealthy will invite you to the home and be like, while you're having a glass of wine or champagne or whatever, hey, let's walk through the family hall and I'll introduce you to the family, memories, right? And they walk through the corridor, they show you the paintings, or they're probably paintings, most of them, some of them are photos now, of their family. And we are stressed out trying to hurry up and find some photos in a cell phone of 10,000 pictures to post on LinkedIn, right? When we're sharing a particular conversation. So the stress level accumulates, which affects quality of life as well. So that's another element of why shedding is a great thing. Like the leaves in the fall, the accumulation of the fallen leaves, it's time to shed. The sensory overload happens, there's too much colors during that preparation for change is what's occurring, right? So from your vantage point, whether it's a cluttered home or business nowadays, it has mental health implications. So how do you suggest one go alleviate or translate through those from I gotta hang on to this memory like some in some cases of hoarders, they're hanging on to stuff because of the memory to transition to
Yeah.
decluttering.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the memories or the emotion that's tied to the thing, um, it is important to recognize how do you find joy in that thing, and if it is tied to the memory, I've seen suggestions of, especially like in the case of seniors who are downsizing, maybe moving into independent living or something like that. Um, it's taking a picture of the item. Or if you have a collection, Margaret does a good job talking about this. If you have a collection of whatever spoons, um, you don't need to display the entire collection. You pick out your favorite ones, that you're most connected to, keep those, and then the idea of having a lot of them probably loses its relevance. I know the idea of collecting is you've got a different emotion or memory connected to each of them, but keep the ones that bring you joy, take pictures of the other ones, share them with loved ones that you can use them to talk about. And then I think on the other side, loved ones receiving items, um, you need to also remember that just because that item is of value to the person giving it to you doesn't mean it necessarily carries that same value to you. And so find the ways you can connect over it. Let it be in the form of story, let it be in the form of photograph rather than being the item itself. I think those are some fair strategies. The other thing, as we age, this idea of agency, and being in control is a pretty important one. And so we've seen plenty of situations where, somebody's in good health and then they have an accident and they find themselves in an independent or assisted living environment, and they don't get to choose the items that come with them. And all of a sudden, a family member is setting up your room or setting up your apartment, and they're bringing things that are not useful to you, that aren't important to you, both emotionally or functionally. And so you've lost that agency over your own space and your own belongings. And so having a plan for that ahead of time is important, just in part of managing your home as we age. But yeah, I mean, it's connecting people. Like, I know a lot of people feel really guilty because they've received an item as a gift. If you think about all the gifts you've given in your life, you probably don't remember what you gave to anybody for any particular occasion, short of a few things that are, high impact, high emotion sort of events or activities. But general gift giving, I don't remember a lot of the gifts I've given. And so the idea that somebody can't get rid of something because I gave it to them as a gift is probably not anybody's reality.
Yeah.
And so I think it's recognizing that as well.
Yeah. As the clutter builds up, I mean, like we said, it significantly impacts mental health. And the fact that you brought up that perspective of, hey, the gift may have been worth more to the giver than the receiver, I think adds value on both sides. It champions that the person that received it can actually, with confidence, get rid of it and not feel guilty. And it also should minimize the blow once that's comprehended to the person that gave the gift. Like, oh, you just gonna throw away my that I gave you, So because what we're trying to compensate for is mental health, because increased stress and anxiety, boom, cluttered environment causes it. Cognitive overload, clutter makes it difficult to focus, right? Depression and emotional distress. Hey, since social distancing, I mean, I think we got enough of that. And speaking of that, the social isolation, the embarrassment about the cluttered living space can cause individuals to withdraw from social interactions and more. So I have this slide here I want to go over real quick. Give me 1 second here. All right. So although the period after World War II, because we're traveling through time to get to where we're at now and how it affects us today. So Although the period after World War II is often identified as the beginning of the immense eruption of consumption across the industrialized world, the historian William Leach, if I'm pronouncing that right, locates its roots actually in the United States around the turn of the century. So in the United States, existing shops were rapidly extended through the 1890s mail order shopping surge. And I wanted to make sure I covered this because you were just talking about the Amazon boxes. And one of the things that we have to deal with as a society is if we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it. So the new century saw massive multi-story department stores covering millions of acres of selling space. Well, we're watching that that's be the opposite now. They're falling apart. They're meaning like they're leaving. The malls are closing. All this stuff. But the multi-story department stores are now popping up online, like you said. Hence the Amazon deliveries. So retailing was already passing decisively from small shopkeepers to corporate giants who had access to investment bankers and drew on assembly line productions of commodities powered by fossil fuels, etc. The traditional objective of making products for their self-evidence usefulness was displaced by the goal of profit, right? And the machinery of enticement. So the reason why I wanted to make sure to go back and cover this, as you can see here on this article, this is if you go back in the video, you'll see the link to this article. These snapshots are from that same article from MIT. So how do we protect, as you mentioned, you were speaking to your son, how do we protect the next generation as the technology of advertising, as the technology, the art of seduction, as all of this demand for profit is becoming more and more aggressive? How would you recommend that we protect our future generations from spiraling into the same trap?
I don't know. I don't have an answer on that. I mean, that's really hard because, you know, we watch our kids, as much as it pains you, you know, they've got these devices in their hands, and it's an advertising delivery mechanism. I mean, they're watching reels and social media that is just, you can't tell the ad from not. Every influencer is being sponsored or paid by somebody. They're selling this myth of a lifestyle. And so, I mean, the digital monitoring or digital management plan with kids is really hard. And I don't know a parent who's got a really good answer on it, other than to just keep having conversations, you know, be honest, truthful. I know for my wife and I, we talk a lot about the mistakes we've made when it comes to financial decisions, you know, from things like using credit to buying cars we can't afford or prematurely, to, you know, being house poor. Like those sorts of decisions are sort of patterns that, you know, you think has been programmed into us, that these are the steps you take, this is how you build a good life. And, you know, you sort of everybody takes a step back and you realize, you know, we walked right into the trap and the cage doors open, but we still, you know, we still sitting there and have a hard time stepping back out of it. So it really is just talking about these things. You know, we in particular have been talking a lot about the use of debt and or really the lack of use of debt, and buy the things you can afford. You know, be disciplined with your purchasing behavior, with your money, have a plan and a budget for it, because if you just let the money spend itself, it will. So those are the things we really talk about, and I think that probably ideally will filter down to their consumption behaviors and the choices they make. But it's hard. I mean, even to go back to this conversation of a car, you know, we went in with a budget, which meant we were going to buy a certain kind of car, which probably wasn't our son's dream car. And so he was like, I'll pay the difference. I'll pay for the gas if you buy me something inefficient. And we're telling him, hey, you're looking to pay with money you don't have and something you can't afford. And, you know, trying to be really, really open about that experience now while his obligations are little, because if you're already willing to take on more than you have to cover payments you don't have income for, felt like a bad precedent for him to be learning and setting. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's the answer to what you were asking for, but this idea of just, yeah, my word of the day, be intentional about it and be thoughtful, and don't overextend is real, and be patient. I think the internet drives this idea of immediacy, and it affects us in a lot of ways. It affects us in the things we want to buy. It affects us in the places we want to live. It affects us in how we think our career should progress. And be patient. Let the plan play out. Is probably the best advice I've got for him.
Hey, I think that was great reflection. I think a lot of people agree with you, and I think a lot of people learn from you at the same time. We're coming through spring, summer, fall, and winter, and that's the shedding, right? The trees shed their leaves, like you're saying. Don't shed, money doesn't grow on trees, so don't shed those leaves, right? While you're letting go of the unnecessary, make sure it's not the leaves, like the money that's supposed to be on the tree. Make it a money tree by keeping those green on the tree, right? So clarity, the bare branches allows more light to reach the forest floor. And sometimes what the past generations and us, you, me, and you're trying to prevent your son from is from you trying to showcase the clarity that you have from learning from the past, or learning whether it's your experiences or the past generations, where, hey, now you can see clearly this is how you want to do this. And there's a rest and renewal period associated with winter where, yeah, it seems like there's nothing growing, but it's setting the stage for the new growth, right? So an important thing, I like that you brought up the car situation, because if we look here, Charles Kettering, General Director of General Motors Research Laboratories, equated that such perpetual change with progress, right? So in a 1929 article called "Keep the Consumer Dissatisfied," he stated that there is no place anyone can sit and rest in an industrial situation. It is a question of change all the time. And it is always going to be that way, because the world only goes along one road, the road of progress. And these views parallel political economist Joseph Schumpeter's, if I pronounced that right, later characterization of capitalism as creative destruction, right? So there's some quotes there that you can read, but tell me, I know you see the life cycles of products shorten now, but let's spin it for a moment to see the positive in it. Part of the keeping the consumer dissatisfied is the fact that you could get something that's new that actually lasts. And then what happens? You get bored with it. So now, and you want something new now because you're bored with it because you've had it so long. So it seems like whether it's an inferior product or a high quality product, the consumer is still going to be dissatisfied and still need your therapy as far as the shedding of winter. Speak on that for a moment, and we'll progress as the word is.
Yeah, I mean, we all go through seasons in our life, and so it's, I guess, appropriate to purchase things that age at the same pace of those seasons. And so I think that's okay, as long as you're buying the things that are things that you're buying for a purpose, for reason, for joy, for whatever. When you're buying it simply because the act of buying it is providing the fulfillment, then I think those are the times we need to be wary, or at least limit those opportunities. Or, like I talked about earlier, have your budget so that you're doing it in a way that is appropriate and comfortable. But yeah, I mean, we're just in such a different place. And when you started the conversation with, you bought things from a place of necessity, and because you didn't have the disposable income to be able to replace it over and over again, the mechanism of functional obsolescence, like, that's not a bad thing. Like, I guess, because it helps pave the road towards progress. The idea of progress is you assume that there's a direction, that we know which way that road's going. And, I don't know what we're progressing towards. And so, you might hit some roadblocks or some dead ends along the way. But yeah, I mean, I guess you just have to mix what that is, just things that are outside of our control. But, the world of the circular economy is, if you are building items that are designed to be functionally obsolete, that they can be broken down into their component parts, and so they can be repurposed or reused or recycled at their highest value on that value ladder. But that's the world we live in, and so trying to make reasonable consumer decisions. And this isn't to say, there's no judgment here, and this isn't to say that I don't buy things on Amazon or whatever, but it's you kind of think, don't just buy the thing because you're in the moment and you click the buy now. Let it sit in your cart for a minute and decide if you really want to use that, or if you really need it, or if there's another way to accomplish what you're trying to get or obtain what you're looking for.
Yeah, well said. And I can help tell you where we're going. We're going towards stress reduction, removing clutter, right? Leading to significant decrease in stress and anxiety levels. We're going towards improved focus and productivity, because a cleaned, organized space enhances concentration and efficiency. We're going towards enhanced self-esteem, right? Because successfully decluttering can boost self-worth and confidence. We're hitting towards better sleep quality, as a tidy environment promotes better sleep, crucial for overall well-being, which is why y'all get so many bed calls to replace and move beds. Increased control is what we're after and what we're driving for, as not only a household but a nation. And decluttering provides a sense of control over one's environment and life. And that's why Trash and Stash is actually like the professional version of the ecosystem of nature's declutterers, right? You and Margaret provide professional services nature has owned for eons. You're the decomposers, the microorganisms that break down the fallen leaves and organic matter, much like how your junk removal service efficiently and effectively clears out unwanted items. You call it upcycling, recycling. How about nutrient cycling? The process of returning nutrients to the soil and the forest, similar to how decluttering can redistribute useful items within a community. This is the therapy you provide to the community. Take a moment now and shine and let them know what Trash and Stash is really about.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, we work with residential and commercial customers to provide professional, affordable, and environmentally responsible junk removal. I'm always sensitive to the word junk. It feels derogatory in a way. We've adopted it so that junk is a verb, not a noun. It's the act of casting something aside because it's no longer useful to that person. It's not calling the item junk. It really is the act of getting rid of something. We do that a few different ways. Our goal is to donate, recycle, or resell first, dump last. We're proud to be America's first and only B Corp certified junk removal company. And so what that means is it's really an accountability tool to make sure we manage purpose and profit. We're evaluated on 5 different areas. One is environmental responsibility. So we largely interpret that in landfill diversion, but it does include greenhouse gas emissions, those sorts of things. But what's our impact on the world? The other is, how do we benefit our community through give back programs and community involvement? How we take care of our employees, both in terms of employee welfare, but also career development, turning people, our industry has a history of sort of using people, abusing them, and treating them as blue collar labor workers. And so we're trying to develop people who can establish careers, financial independence. And so we're proud of that. The way we take care of our customers. And so we've got our idea is to provide shockingly human experiences. And so we know people are going through moments of transition when we're interacting with them. And so we're sensitive to that. We're judgment free. We're empathetic to the environments that we're working in. We want them to be comfortable with that process. We're going to make mistakes. We own them. We take care of our people and treat them the way we would want to be. I mean, it's the one lesson we can all teach each other is treat others the way you wish to be treated, and that's really the principle we operate our business with. And then the other element is governance, and so how our business is structured. And so legally, we're set up as a B Corp, which means that if we were to ever sell this company, whoever obtains it would be under obligation to maintain that same purpose and profit balance. So those are things that separate us. There's a lot of other folks. It's financially advantageous for junk removal companies to be able to donate and recycle. And so you can put a recycling logo on the side of your truck because it seems and looks like the right way to do that. For us, we actually manage those processes. We're transparent in it. So we release a weekly diversion report. So everybody knows exactly where we stand on a week in, week out basis on the items that we're keeping from the landfill. So that's who we are. It's personal in a lot of ways. Those things are the things that are important to me. And so it's important to start a business that is built off of those things. But it's important to our customers. And it means that we find customers who value those things. And so we're in alignment a lot of the time with the people who choose to hire us.
Yeah. Amazing service to the people and the environment, the past and the future. Applaud you for that. We did on our last video, we illustrated how it was like 7,300 pounds, which was in 1 week was the weight, which was like the equivalent of what a Escalade or various trucks in 1 week was diverted from the landfill. So that much, think about how much that weight is. So you're providing emotional support for people and environment alike. Collectively, you and Margaret are helping Aging in Place, offering insights and creating safe, manageable spaces for seniors who wish to remain in their homes. She has a program in the audience. Be sure to check her out. You can find her on LinkedIn and various platforms. Still reach out to her. She has a program for corporations and individuals alike to help understanding and to grow it. She's a senior real estate specialist. So if you need to buy a home and you're at an age where you would call yourself a senior, go check her out. So Cam here is going to be part of the junk removal, swiftly and responsibly handle your physical aspects of decluttering, and collectively there's sustainable practices there that both of them can help you build and become new habits. Mindful consumption, donation, and recycling. It's all a part of this process. What have we not covered that you want to mention at the moment, Cam?
Not a lot. I think you did a good job covering it. I think the biggest thing is to, I know the initial focus of this conversation was aging and decluttering, as part of life transitions and seasons. And I think it's having a plan. We can be a part of that plan, but going into it with, what you hope to accomplish, bringing the resources in so that you're doing it in a way that feels complete is probably an important point to make. If you just come in and you don't know what you want us to do and you're pointing, we can do that. We can take some things, and there's plenty of times that that's appropriate. It goes back to the messy bed, messy head. Sometimes you just need to get some stuff out of there so you have room to breathe and space to work. And so, that initial pairing creates, I guess, margin in a way to be able to do the rest of it. But that's got to be a step in the plan, so that you can build on long-term successes and accomplish the goals. But otherwise, with regard to consumerism, with regard to decluttering, I think you did a good job covering it.
Hey, it's a team sport, and I like the fact that you brought up the planning and the season aspects being the gist of the conversation, because guess what? The birds, they can plan to go south when it gets cold up north. We plan when it's the rainy season. We know we need to have the umbrella in the car. So when you are, just admit the truth to yourself that there are these seasons. And I think that's why I created it in this structure, was because once we are honest with ourselves that this is the cycle, no matter what, the large scale cycle, the micro cycle, we can plan. And you guys, Margaret and yourself, empathetic approach helps people feel respected and understood as they work through the difficult task of parting with cherished belongings, right? And it's mental health that we all need. So the psychological impact of decluttering is significant, but few people pay attention to it, because we're hanging on to stuff. We don't want to buy new stuff, but buying new stuff may be part of the therapy. So we got to get rid of the old, and that helps the economy, because we got to stimulate the economy. So everything wins, believe it or not, for the person listening, if you're to get rid of the stuff and put yourself in a position to get new stuff. Stress reduction, focus improve. We talked about all of that, etc., etc., etc. So I really appreciate you, Kim. Thanks for joining and supporting and sharing with the community. Margaret was in the background trying to get on, and she had technical difficulties. So always a perfect day. I'm Pasha Paroh.